Following the brutal and tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk on 10 September, people have rightly recognized it as a political assassination akin to that of a modern-day Martin Luther King. Vigils in Kirk's honor have been seen around the world, not only in his home country in the US, but in the UK, Japan, Spain, Poland, South Korea, New Zealand, and yes, even in South Africa. The sheer masses of people that have offered their time and resources to rally in the streets in an awe-inspiring wave of candles, solemn prayer, and peaceful demonstrations cannot possibly be denied, ignored, or reasoned irrelevant. At least that's what I thought, until I read the Daily Maverick's Rebecca Davis's 2 cents on the matter, because that's what this analysis, or should I rather say op-ed, is worth, and that's being generous. I'm Ilian Boshoff, and today I'm ripping apart Rebecca's piece titled, "Charlie Kirk may have fans in SA, but his views are inconsequential here." Davis starts by pointing out the blatantly obvious observation that South Africa is a very different country than the US. Hoi, nooit. Way to grip your readers with a remarkable revelation, Rebecca. She seems to think that the US's culture wars carry no weight in South Africa. Well, she tries to define the kind of delusion that what one sees in pockets of the internet accurately mirrors real life. She deems this the kind of delusion tantamount to that of people fearing that the EFF might actually come to majority rule and power in SA, by illustrating the EFF's relatively poor election performances over the years. Rebecca continued, "It is worth bearing these figures in mind at times like now, when the assassination of the US podcaster Charlie Kirk ostensibly seems to be reverberating deeply through South African social media." Then, she has the gall to subhead the following section, "Charlie who? Lady, man, may means. Who at this point in time would not know the name Charlie Kirk? South Africans were inspired by the civil rights movement ongoing in the US during the 60s, long before social media's existence. How she could elude that because only 40% of South Africans use any form of social media, the majority of our country does not know who he is simply belachelijk. Nearly every single short on YouTube is a tribute to the life and memory of Charlie Kirk. People who would not know who he is and what happened on that day are clearly following your advice by spending less time on their phones, which would make the advice behind your article null and void, by the way. They did not need to hear it from you. Maybe this woman actually thinks that the 40% don't discuss these things with their friends or family. The biggest news story in the world since Trump's attempted assassination last year. Davis points to a few arguments made by Kirk over the years, quoting him saying that the civil rights movement was a huge mistake, Jews being the largest funders of Marxist ideas, that Kirk dare advised wives to submit to their husbands, and I quote, in one of his most notorious moments said in September 2024, that if his hypothetical 10-year-old daughter were raped, he would force her to carry the baby to term. Was the word forced accurately portraying the context of what he was conveying there, Rebecca? During a Jubilee debate facing off against 20 opponents, during which, in this particular moment, he was facing a hysterically hostile young woman not ceasing her vitriolic interrogation on a hypothetical question. This is what he actually said.
Many people are using this very clip to paint him as the evil guy. Watch the whole thing.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got and she was going to give birth and she would, no wait, would you want her to go through that and carry her baby?
That's off series, yes, the baby would be delivered.
Oh, okay, great. So that's insane.
But let me tell you why. No, hold on, let me ask you a question. There's 2 ultrasounds I have. One is a baby conceived in, one is a baby conceived by a loving couple. Which one is which?
Your daughter was probably hopefully conceived by a somewhat loving couple.
Which person here was conceived by? Tell me which one was conceived by.
You don't know.
Exactly, because it's all human rights and
But
it's all
that
human
doesn't
beings.
matter.
So
But it's about your daughter who has to give birth to it and is going to be tortured by that for the rest of her life. That's going to take away every freedom she's ever going to have. That's going to ruin her life. She's going to grow up and she's going to be attached to another thing.
The point is how you were conceived is irrelevant to what human rights you get. Wouldn't it be a better story to say something evil happened and we do something good in the face of evil instead of saying we're going to do evil and then murder the being because we're going to pander to the evil? No. What makes the West great is that we do good after evil, not evil after evil.
Anyone who has watched enough of Charlie Kirk's countless debates over years and years of him reaching out in demonstrably diplomatic discussions would know that Charlie almost always offered a lot of nuance to what he was arguing. And no, I'm not saying he was the end-all and be-all of opinions. He was a flawed human being capable of being mistaken and has many times sincerely admitted to that fact. I have seen him humbly yield when he was proved wrong. I digress. She went on. His was a politics of grievance that fell on fertile soil among disaffected young white men looking for something external to blame for their perceived lack of prestige or success or respect. I cannot count the amount of clips of white, black, and people of color that would show up to his campus debates just to thank him for changing their mindsets and, in effect, their lives. Don't believe me? Here's an entire montage of Black Americans supporting Charlie Kirk. These are the utterances of a woman who clearly did not care to listen to a single sentiment he championed, until she so desperately sought her own relevance by trying to debunk this massive global awakening while cherry-picking his arguments. Let's read on. Kirk also emerged at the perfect time in the Trump era with MAGA Republicans already worked into a frenzy about issues like pronouns and trans rights, features of a culture war between left and right, which has been raging in the US for decades, but which simply cannot be mapped neatly onto South Africa, however much some might hope to do so. Let me tell you, Rebecca, even if you were right about that, what you should be pointing out is that it's a crying shame that South Africans don't recognize the culture war in our own country. Because we ought to. Instead, we blindly adopt radical Western ideologies without in-depth discussions or debates. And the reason why you find no evidence in your so-called analysis is because, despite being riddled with rhetoric, inciting, and now actual political violence, US citizens enjoy far more free speech privileges than we South Africans do. How many people have lost their jobs or have been cancelled in SA for daring to utter an inconvenient opinion or truth? Just now, the Kiefness or David Scott, not Davis Scott, Rebecca, lost a contract for paying homage to Charlie's death. Just look at the indefensible treatment of Pretoria Girls High School principal Erasmus, and she didn't even say or do anything wrong. But what she so miserably fails to recognize as a middle-aged woman in a third world country is just how much the West, and particularly the US and Hollywood, in fact does influence our culture. We might be 3 years behind the trend, which is something I deem a blessing and not regress. Because we have the privilege of seeing destructive progressive policies play out in real time and decide whether it is something we wish for South Africa. Another crying shame? We don't. I need only reference the trans ideologies that have already seeped into our mainstream, like gender-neutral bathrooms in shopping malls and on UCT's campus, in a rape-riddled country like South Africa. Not only that, but an ongoing court bid of a biological male and convicted murderer in Johannesburg pleading to be recognized as a female and transferred to a single holding cell and receiving gender-affirming care on the taxpayer's dime. What I'm trying to say, my dear South Africans, is that we should bloody well be paying very close attention to what is unfolding across the globe. Rebecca rightly points out that a majority of South Africans identify as Christians, but according to her, it seems the majority of us are so bland in our faith that we might just be too apathetic to the travesty that claimed the life of a God-fearing man who defended truth with words, not violence. We should be taking a page out of America's book and reject the policies that have divided the US as much as it has, especially considering how divided we already are. And Rebecca ought to be embarrassed for pointing out her analysis, just, because she thinks you should know. But don't hear it from me, Rebecca. Take it from someone like Bill Maher.
Well, this is a day, because a guy who sat there, Charlie Kirk, got shot today.
Yeah.
And I can't stop thinking about it.
Neither can I.
And we shouldn't. And if you're on the other side of the political divide and you don't care because the wrong team guy got shot, you. You're what's wrong with this country.
If you agree with what I'm saying, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to The Truth Report.